Hello. In this video, we will learn how to configure a connector for Splunk Enterprise to collect events and metrics data by using BMC Helix Intelligent Integrations. We will also learn how to view this data in BMC Helix Operations Management. Splunk contains data in the form of reports. A report can contain events or metrics information in its fields or columns. In this video, we will configure a connector that will collect data from an events report and a metrics report. Let's look at the sample reports. Here you see a report that contains events such as Apache service went down and link up. Next is a report that contains statistics info in its columns such as health.log and metrics.log. The overall process of data collection from Splunk typically involves the following tasks. Meet the prerequisites. Configure the connector. Verify the connection. View data in BMC Helix applications. Before we start configuring the connector, there are some prerequisites that we need to meet. Let's go through these prerequisites in detail. We need to ensure that the Splunk user account that we plan to use to collect data has access to the required Splunk report. Next, we need to ensure the Splunk report from which we want to collect data is part of the search app. In addition, the Splunk fields from which you want to collect data must appear under selected fields. For example, severity and type fields appear under selected fields. We will extract data from severity and type fields later in the video. Moving on to the next prerequisite, to display meaningful data in BMC Helix Operations Management from an events report, the report must have the fields that contain the following type of information. Event ID, title, severity, status, host, present by default. Additionally, the report can have as many fields as needed, such as description, category, subcategory, origin URI. For example, this report contains some of the fields that we just discussed. Note that if severity is represented by numeric values in Splunk, for example, 1 or 2, convert the values to a string format with the highlighted possible values. Also, if status is represented by numeric values in Splunk, for example, 1 or 2, convert the values to a string format with the highlighted possible values. Moving on to the prerequisite for a report containing metrics info. To display meaningful data in BMC Helix Operations Management, the report must have fields that contain the following type of information. Timestamp and metrics. You can have as many metrics columns as required. In addition, metric columns must have numeric values. In addition to the report prerequisites, depending on the Splunk deployment, do one of the following. If Splunk is deployed in your SaaS environment. To allow communication from the egress IP, that is where the Splunk connector is available, to the Splunk host, open the port on which the Splunk host is listening. Request the egress IP of your tenant from BMC software if you don't already have it. If Splunk is deployed in your on-premises environment, you need to deploy the BMC Helix Intelligent Integrations gateway by downloading the script from the UI. Let's go to BMC Helix Intelligent Integrations and start configuring the connector. Click plus on the Sources panel. Here we will choose Splunk Enterprise. First, we will configure a source connection. Enter a unique instance name that will help you identify the connector instance later. Enter the Splunk host name. If you do not want to use the default port, enter a different port number. Here we assume that we are using an HTTPS connection. The HTTPS option is selected by default. If you don't want to use an HTTPS connection, clear this option, and update the host name and port number accordingly. Now we will enter the username for the Splunk host. Enter the password for the Splunk host. Click Validate and Create. After the connection's details are validated, the instance name appears in the source connection list. The destination connection is selected already. In the data types section, all the data types for which you can collect data are selected by default. If you don't want to collect data for any of the data types, you can clear that option. For now, we will keep both the options selected. The Collectors section contains parameters for collecting events and metrics data. Depending on how a report is configured in Splunk, and whether the fields from which you want to extract data appear under selected fields or not, you can configure these parameters now or later by editing the connector configuration. In the II_events report, the fields such as severity and type from which you want to extract data appear under selected fields, so we can configure the data collection parameters now for this report. For the messages by minute last 3 hours report, we need to configure these parameters later as the fields such as health.log and metrics.log from which we want to extract data don't appear under selected fields. Let's configure the collection parameters for events now. The collection schedule parameter indicates the frequency by which the data is collected. The data collection window parameter indicates the historical time period from the current time for which the data should be collected from Splunk. The data latency parameter indicates the time by which the data collection window should be shifted far back on the timeline. We will retain default values for these three parameters. The saved search name field shows the Splunk reports to which you have access. Select a report, for example, II_events from the list. The Splunk fields to exclude field shows the report fields for which data will not be collected. We will retain the default values. From severity field name, select a field available in the Splunk report that you want to map to this field. For example, in the II_events report, we have a field with severity values, severity that you can map here. Remember that the severity field in the report must have string values. Similarly, we will map the type field in the II_events report to status field name because in the report, the status info is contained in the type field. Remember that the field containing status info in the report must have string values. Similarly, we will map the Splunk report fields to all the remaining fields. We will configure the available collection parameters for metrics later in this video. Click Create Collectors to finish configuring the collector parameters for event collection. Now, we will look at the distribution parameters for events. These parameters indicate various settings related to the distribution of the collected data to the BMC Helix Operations Management. Let's retain the default values for event distribution parameters. We will configure the distribution parameters for metrics later. Click Create Distributors to finish creating the distribution parameters for event and metrics collection. At this point, you have two options: either save the connector now and collect data later, or start the data collection immediately. We will click Save Stream to start the data collection later. On the Sources panel, now you see the connector instance. The green check mark indicates that the connection with Splunk is established. Now let's configure the collection and distribution parameters for metrics. Click Configure Mediator. First, we will configure the collection parameters for metrics. We will retain default values for the collection schedule, data collection window and data latency parameters. The saved search name field shows the Splunk reports to which you have access. Select messages by minute last 3 hours. If the field name list does not list the columns such as health.log and metrics.log contained in the report, click Edit JSON. Scroll down to the metrics section. In choice, enter the column name from the messages by minute last 3 hours report. Click Save. Click Edit JSON to close the edit mode. Field name shows the column you just entered in the JSON. The metric name field is reserved for future use. Skip this field. If you want to collect data from more than one column in the messages by minute last 3 hours report, click Add Field and then Edit JSON, as done for the first column. For now, we will collect data only for one column, health.log. Now, let's configure the distribution parameters for metrics. Similar to events, we will retain the default values for distribution parameters for metrics. Click Save and Close. To start collection of events and metrics, we need to start the data streams for events and metric. To do that, click Streams. Activate the streams for events and metrics. You can wait for the next scheduled run of the data collection to start or run the data collection immediately. We will run the data collection now. After the data collection and distribution is complete, the last run status column shows the number of items distributed to BMC Helix applications for events and metrics. Now it's time to validate the data received from Splunk. Let's move to BMC Helix Operations Management and check whether we have received the events and metrics in BMC Helix Operations Management. The events page shows the events received from various sources. Enter Splunk Event in Filter to see events only from Splunk. The events page is showing the events such as Apache service went down and link up. You can click the modified timestamp for an event to see its details. Let's check the metrics now. Select Devices from the monitoring menu. Search for the devices from a particular host. Click the device for which you want to see the metrics. The Splunk report name appears as the monitor name. Click the monitor name. Here you can see that the metric data is collected for the health.log column from the messages by minute last 3 hours report. We hope this video helped you learn how to collect and view events and metrics from Splunk. For more information, see the online documentation at docs.bmc.com. To access the documentation, click the link in this video's description. Thank you for watching.